This is lesson 4 in module 5, Ancient India. It's called The Origins of Buddhism. And it's on page 160. I'm going to skip down to this section here. Siddhartha's search for wisdom. In the late 500s BC, a restless young man dissatisfied with the teachings of Hinduism began to ask his own questions about life and religious matters. In time, he found answers. These answers attracted many followers, and the young man's ideas became the foundation of a major new religion in India. The restless young man was Siddhartha Gautama, born around 563 BC in northern India near the Himalayas. Siddhartha was a prince who grew up in luxury. Born a kshatriya, a member of the warrior class, Siddhartha never had to struggle with the problems that many people of his time faced. However, he was not satisfied. He felt that something was missing in his life. Siddhartha looked around him and saw how hard other people had to work and how much they suffered. He saw people grieving for lost loved ones and wondered why there was so much pain in the world. As a result, he began to ask questions about the meaning of human life. Before Siddhartha reached age 30, he left his home and family to look for answers. He traveled to many regions in India. Wherever he traveled, he had discussions with priests and people known for their wisdom. Yet no one could give convincing answers to Siddhartha's wisdom. Siddhartha did not give up. Instead, he became even more determined to find the answers he was seeking. For several years, he wandered in search for answers. Siddhartha wanted to free his mind from daily concerns. For a while, he didn't even wash himself. He also started fasting, or going without food. He devoted much of his time to meditation, the focusing of the mind on spiritual ideas. According to legend, Siddhartha spent 6 years wandering throughout India. He eventually came to a place near the town of Gaya, close to the Ganges River. There he sat down under a tree and meditated. After 7 weeks of deep meditation, he suddenly had the answers that he had been looking for. He realized that human sufferings comes from three things: wanting what we like but do not have, wanting to keep what we like and already have, and not wanting what we dislike but have. Siddhartha spent 7 more weeks meditating under the tree, which his followers later named the Tree of Wisdom. He then described his new ideas to his 5 former companions. His followers later called this talk the first sermon. Siddhartha was about 35 years old when he found enlightenment under the tree. From that point on, he would be called the Buddha, or the Enlightened One. The Buddha spent the rest of his life traveling across northern India and teaching his people of his ideas. As he traveled, the Buddha gained many followers, especially among Indian merchants and artisans. He even taught them the views to a few kings. These followers were the first believers in Buddhism, a religion based on the teachings of Buddha. The Buddha was raised in Hindu, and many of his teachings reflected Hindu ideas. Like Hindus, he believed that people should act morally. As the heart of Buddha's teachings were four guiding principles. These became known as the Four Noble Truths. Suffering and unhappiness are a part of human life. No one can escape sorrow. Suffering comes from our desires for pleasure and material goods. People cause their own misery because they want things they cannot have. People can overcome desire and ignorance and reach nirvana, a state of perfect peace. Reaching nirvana frees the soul from suffering and from the need of further reincarnation. People can overcome ignorance and desire by following an eightfold path that leads to wisdom, enlightenment, and salvation. chart shows the steps in the Eightfold Path. The Buddha believed that this path was a middle way between human desires and denying oneself any pleasure. He said, "A life given to pleasure, devoted to pleasures and lusts, this is degrading, sensual, vulgar, and ignoble and profitless. And a life given to mortifications, this is a painful, ignoble, and profitless. It is the middle path which leads to insight, which leads to wisdom, which conduces to calm, to knowledge, to the Sambodhi, to the Nirvana." The Buddha believed that people should overcome their desires for material goods. They should, however, be reasonable and not starve their bodies or cause themselves unnecessary pain. Some of the Buddhist teachings challenged traditional Hindus' ideas. For example, the Buddha told people that they did not have to follow the Vedas to achieve enlightenment. The Buddha also challenged the authority of priests. But similar to Hindu scriptures and sages, the Buddha emphasized that it was the responsibility of each individual to work for his or her own liberation. Priests could not help them. However, the Buddha did not reject the Hindu teaching of reincarnation. He taught that people who failed to reach nirvana would have to be reborn time and time again until they achieve it. The Buddha was opposed to people needing to follow social rules in order to achieve liberation or good karma. Those who followed the Eightfold Path properly, he said, would achieve nirvana. It didn't matter what varna they belonged to as long as they lived the way they should. The Buddha's teachings won over many people. Many of India's herdsmen, farmers, and artisans liked hearing that the lack of knowledge of the sacred text would not be a barrier of enlightenment. Buddhism made them feel that they had the power to change their lives without rituals or priests. The Buddha also gained followers among Brahmins and priests, or princes, who welcomed his ideas without avoiding extreme behavior while seeking liberation. By the time of his death, around 583 BC, the Buddha's influence was spreading rapidly throughout India. Buddhism continued to attract followers after the Buddha's death. After spreading through India, the religion began to spread to other areas as well. According to the Buddhist tradition, 500 of the Buddha's followers gathered together shortly after he died. They wanted to make sure that the Buddha's teachings were remembered correctly. In the years after the council, the Buddha's followers spread his teachings throughout India. The idea spread very quickly because Buddhist teachings were popular and easy to understand. Within 200 years after the Buddha's death, his teachings had spread throughout most of India. The spread of Buddhism increased after one of the most powerful kings in India, Asoka, became Buddhist in the 200s BC. Once he converted, he built Buddhist temples and schools throughout India. More importantly, though, he worked to spread Buddhism into areas outside of India. You'll learn more about Asoka's and his accomplishment in the next lesson. Asoka sent Buddhist missionaries, or people who worked to spread their religious beliefs to other kingdoms in India. One group of these missionaries sailed to the island of Sri Lanka around 251 BC. Others followed trade routes east to what is now Myanmar to other parts of Southeast Asia. Missionaries also went north to the areas near the Himalayas. Missionaries also introduced Buddhism to the lands of west of India. They founded Buddhist communities in Central Asia and Persia. They even taught about Buddhism as far as away as Syria and Egypt. Buddhism continued to grow over the centuries. Eventually it spread via the Silk Road into China. Then Korea and Japan Through their missionary through their work, missionaries taught Buddhism to millions of people. Even as Buddhism spread through Asia, however, it began to change.
Theravada branch tried to
Sorry about
follow the
that.
Buddhist teaching.
Not all Buddhists could agree on their beliefs and practices. Eventually, disagreements between Buddhists led to a split within the religion. Two major branches developed: Theravada and the Mahayana. Members of the Theravada tried to follow the Buddha's teaching exactly as he stated them. The other group, though, believed that others could interpret teachings to help people reach nirvana. Both branches have millions of believers today, but Mahayana is by far the larger branch. These different branches have established some of their own customs and traditions. For example, in the Mahayana branch, there is a less focus on nirvana and more on a knowledge of the mastery of wisdom. Both branches of Buddhism have some traditions and customs in common. For example, gifts play an important role in the customs of Buddhism. People can worship the Buddha by showing respect or giving gifts. Buddhists can present their gifts at shrines dedicated to the Buddha. Worshippers can also give gifts to monks. Monks are people who devote themselves to religious study and discipline. Buddhists observe many holidays. Three main events of the Buddha's life: his birth, enlightenment, and death are all holidays. The end of the Vasa, the rainy season, is celebrated. All Souls' Day, New Year's, and harvest festivals are also celebrated. For some holidays, people may wear all white or new clothes to symbolize rebirth and renewal, or they may visit temples for special sutras or services. One of the most important rituals in Buddhism is making a pilgrimage. These travels to holy sites are meant to aid in a person's spiritual development.